Hello and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, haunting stories that gently draw you deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now get comfortable, let your body relax, and allow the outside world to fade into silence. Tonight, somewhere beyond the darkness, a story is waiting. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let the shadows guide you into Umbral Dread. Story 1 Jenny was in the back seat singing the same line over and over like it was the best song ever written. We're getting a kitty. We're getting a kitty. Each time she sang it, she kicked her feet a little harder, her sneakers tapping against the back of my seat. I caught her eyes in the rearview mirror and couldn't help smiling, even though my stomach was tight. The animal shelter was about 20 minutes from our house. Jenny had been singing for most of the drive, and I could tell she planned to keep going until we pulled into the parking lot. She had the kind of excitement that doesn't burn out. It just keeps building. The truth was, the whole getting a cat idea hadn't started with me. It had started with my wife, Holly, who said it would be good for all of us. She said Jenny would learn responsibility, feeding it, helping clean up after it, learning that another living thing depends on you. She said it would help our house, too, because we'd been seeing signs of mice now and then. In her mind, it was a warm, healthy decision and a practical one at the same time. In my mind, it was another expense we didn't need, another mouth to feed, even if it was small, another set of problems to manage. And, if I was honest, another reason for me to be the bad guy when Jenny got bored of the responsibility and I ended up doing the feeding and the litter box chores myself. I'd never been a cat person. Dogs, sure, fish, fine, but cats always felt like they were only half tame, like they were making a deal with you, not joining your family. And I wasn't eager to sign up for that. But I'd lasted maybe 3 weeks before the two of them wore me down. They were a team. Holly would bring up the benefits and the timing and the deals you could get from shelters. Jenny would look at me with those pigtails and those hopeful eyes like this was the most important thing in her whole world. Eventually, I gave in. There are some fights you lose on purpose because the win isn't worth it. Daddy, Jenny said, pausing her singing long enough to ask the question that mattered most to her. Can I choose any cat I want? I hesitated. I was driving, watching the road, trying to answer in a way that wouldn't corner me later. My main concern wasn't color or breed or fluffiness. I wanted a cat that would do what Holly claimed it would do. Catch mice. Earn its keep. I didn't want some fragile, high-maintenance animal that would hide under furniture and need a special diet and expensive vet visits every month. I said carefully, checking my mirrors before turning left. Let's choose one together, okay? Jenny seemed satisfied with that. She didn't argue. She went back to singing like the question had already been answered in the best possible way. The shelter building came into view a few minutes later, squatting near a row of trees with a simple sign out front. The sky was clear. The day looked normal. Nothing about it suggested it was going to turn into one of those memories you can't get rid of no matter how hard you try. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and something stale underneath it. A middle-aged man stood at the counter wearing jeans, work boots, and a polo shirt with the shelter logo on it. The shirt looked worn, like it had been washed too many times. He looked like someone who had spent years around animals. He had that tired friendliness that comes from repeating the same conversations all day, but still trying to mean it. He smiled, shook my hand, and then waved at Jenny. "Good morning," he said. "Welcome. I'm Gary. How can I help you two today?" Jenny didn't even let me speak. "We're getting a kitty." Gary chuckled the way adults do when they're pleased by a child's excitement. "Is that so? Well, I'm sure we can help with that." Then his eyes shifted back to me, and his tone changed just slightly into something more professional. "Anything specific you have in mind?" "Well," I said, forcing my voice into something upbeat, "it's mostly up to her. I just want something that's not too high maintenance, and a good mouser if possible." Gary nodded like he'd heard that 1,000 times. "Very well. Let's see if we have something you like." He walked to a door on the right, swiped a badge hanging from his belt, and the lock clicked open with a soft beep. He held the door open with a little flourish, as if we were stepping into something exciting. Jenny grabbed my hand and tugged, and we followed him through. The hallway beyond was gray concrete. The smell of cat litter grew stronger, and somewhere far off I could hear dogs barking. The sound bounced off the walls and made the place feel bigger than it was. We walked for a few seconds and came to a T-shaped junction. Gary pointed. "Cats are to the right." I still remember the exact moment we turned the corner, because it felt like my brain stalled out, like a part of me couldn't accept what my eyes were showing me. On the left, there was a wide window looking into a large room where multiple cats moved around freely. There were toys scattered everywhere, little tunnels, scratching posts, cardboard boxes. It was set up to look friendly. Safe, normal, and sitting right in the middle of that room, among the cats, was a man. Not just any man. A man in a catsuit. I stopped so suddenly that Gary nearly walked into my back. "What the?" I cut myself off mid-word because Jenny was right there, and I didn't want to add another swear word to her growing collection. Gary followed my gaze and didn't even react the way I expected. No embarrassment. No sudden apology. No whisper of, "Oh, sorry, that's staff training or someone snuck in." He said, very casually, "Oh, that's just old Tibbles." I stared at him, then stared back through the window. The man had noticed us. His head turned slowly, and he looked at us with a blank, empty expression. The catsuit was a full-body outfit that covered everything except his face, hands, and feet. It looked cheap, like something ordered online from a place that didn't care what it shipped. It was dirty, stained, and worn. The man's face was narrow, with a messy beard. Strands of sweaty, dirty blonde hair escaped around the edges, where the suit clung tightly to his head. The fabric pulled his skin in strange ways around his cheeks and jawline, like it was shrinking. His bare hands and feet were grimy. His fingernails and toenails were long, yellow, and cracked, like he hadn't cut them in months. He stared at Gary and Jenny for a second, then his blue eyes slid over to me and locked on. I didn't like the way he looked at me. It wasn't playful. It wasn't shy. It wasn't confused. It was a long, steady stare that made the back of my neck go tight. Then he dropped down onto all fours and moved with a weird, practiced shuffle toward a water tray. He lowered his head, opened his mouth, and began lapping up water with a pink tongue that was far too human. The sight was so wrong I couldn't even process it properly at first. It was like watching someone violate a rule you didn't know existed until they broke it. Gary kept talking, like this was normal and I was the one being strange. His words drifted in and out as my mind tried to decide whether I was being pranked. "Tibbles has been with us a long time," Gary said. "Tough old tomcat. He's been on the streets for years. Looks a bit rough, sure, but he's honestly one of our most well-behaved cats." I finally found my voice. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, turning to Gary. The shock was giving way to anger now because my daughter was right there. If it is, I don't think it's appropriate. Do you? Gary blinked at me, genuinely confused. Joke? I'm not sure what you mean, sir. I looked back through the window. The man had finished drinking and was now scratching behind his ear with his foot, bending in a way most people couldn't. Jenny had pressed her face up close to the glass. Fascinated, she didn't look scared. She looked delighted. Gary's face still showed nothing but confusion, like he truly didn't understand what I was upset about. Then, Jenny said the exact words I was dreading. Daddy, can we take Tibbles home with us? I spun around so fast I almost made myself dizzy. What? No, of course not. We're not taking that thing home. Jenny flinched at my tone. Tears filled her eyes instantly. But I want Tibbles. Gary stepped in again, still calm. Sir, I get that he looks a little rough, but I can assure you Tibbles is very well behaved. He's good with kids, affectionate. Shots are up to date. He's in good health, aside from some scars. Fights with other alley cats. You know how it is. I just stared at him. I couldn't come up with an answer that made sense. Behind me, Jenny was crying softly. Through the window, Tibbles was sniffing under another cat's tail like he'd done it 1,000 times. Cats moved around him without fear, stepping over his arms and brushing past his legs. And I stood there feeling sick and angry, and somehow trapped, like I'd walked into a reality where everyone else had agreed on the rules except me. I refused to adopt anything that day. I insisted we leave. Jenny's crying followed me out of the building and into the car like a fog. The drive home was worse than the drive there. Jenny cried quietly, not even yelling now, just that steady heartbreak sound children make when they feel wronged. Outside, dark clouds rolled in and covered the sun, turning the world gray. The timing felt too perfect, like even the sky was taking sides against me. On the way, she begged and begged. Sweetie, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, I get that you're upset, but we can't just take a strange man home with us. Jenny stared out the window like she couldn't stand to look at me. Tibbles isn't a man, she said, angry through tears. Tibbles is a kitty. I didn't argue after that. There was no point. When we got home, I opened the front door, and Jenny pushed past me and ran upstairs, slamming her bedroom door so hard the walls shook. Holly called from the living room. Honey, what's wrong? Where's the cat? And why is Jenny in such a mood? I dropped onto the couch like my bones had turned to sand. You're not going to believe what happened, I said. As I told her everything, Holly's expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief to something like disgust. When I finished, she stared at me for a few seconds, as if waiting for me to laugh and admit it was a joke. Finally, she said, What? I know how it sounds, I said. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't seen it. That's messed up, she said quietly. Who does a prank like that on a 6-year-old? I'm calling them tomorrow, I muttered. I'm going to tear them apart. Holly didn't answer right away. I saw the moment her mind clicked into a plan. She sat up straighter, eyes sharper. I'm off tomorrow, she said. What if I go there with Jenny and raise hell? Talk to the owner, complain, make a scene. Maybe they'll give us a deal. Free adoption, free food, something, I frowned. After that, you still want a cat from that place? The next shelter is an hour away, Holly said. And Jenny still wants a cat. We can use this. Jenny gets her pet. We get a discount. And whoever thought this was funny gets fired. I didn't like it. My skin crawled just thinking about stepping inside that building built again. But Holly had that look she got when she decided something. When she wanted to protect our daughter and win at the same time. Fine, I said. but I'm not going back there. The next morning, it felt almost normal again. Holly had talked to Jenny the night before and promised that today they would definitely bring home a cat. Jenny came down to breakfast smiling, her earlier tears replaced by fresh excitement. Seeing her happy again eased the guilt in my chest, at least a little. "Are we getting Tibbles today?" Jenny asked, hopeful. I looked at Holly and she smoothed Jenny's hair. "We'll see when we get there," she said. "Maybe you'll like another cat too." I mouthed a silent thank you to Holly, kissed them both, and left for work. All day I debated telling my coworkers about what happened. The words sounded insane even in my head. A man in a catsuit in the shelter cat room. A worker calling him Old Tibbles. A child wanting to bring him home. It sounded like something you'd hear in a creepy internet story and laugh at. So instead of telling anyone, I called Holly around midday. She picked up quickly. "Hey dear, how's work?" "Slow," I said. "Did you go to the shelter yet?" "We did," Holly said, and she sounded pleased with herself. "And guess what? Your wife pulled it off. We got our cat for free. You should see him. He's a cutie. Jenny already loves him." I stopped walking for a second in the middle of the office hallway. "You got a cat," I repeated slowly. "For free." "Yep," Holly said. "I talked to the owner. Was Gary there?" I asked. "Did you give him hell?" "No, he wasn't," she said. The owner seemed confused, but he said he'd look into it. I forced myself to breathe. "Okay," I said. "Thanks for doing it. I'll see you when I get home." I hung up, still uneasy, but I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe yesterday had been some weird employee thing, and today they'd be normal. Maybe Gary had been out, and whoever was in charge realized how inappropriate it was. Maybe I'd be coming home to a regular shelter cat, like every other family that adopts one. When I opened my front door after work, I smelled lasagna. The house smelled warm and familiar, like a good evening. Then Jenny shouted from the living room, "Daddy, come look at our kitty." "I'm coming, sweetie," I called, hanging up my coat and stepping out of my shoes. I walked into the living room and felt my blood turn cold. Jenny was kneeling on the carpet, stroking filthy fake fur. Tibbles was lying on our living room floor. The man in the catsuit had his eyes closed like he was enjoying it. For a second I couldn't make sound. My mouth opened, but my brain couldn't find words. Then my voice came out as a shout. "Holly!" My wife rushed in from the kitchen, wiping her hands. "What is it?" I pointed at the thing on the floor. "What the hell is this?" Holly's face tightened in confusion. "It's our cat," she said. "We got a cat, just like I told you. Look how happy Jenny is." Jenny wrapped her arms around Tibbles' chest. "Tibbles is my best friend." I felt sick. "Jenny, get away from that." Holly blinked at me like I was the one acting strange. "What's wrong? Did something happen at work?" "No," I said. My voice shook. "Nothing happened at work. It's him. It's the man in the catsuit from yesterday." Holly's expression softened, concerned now. "No, it's not. It's a cat. It's just a cat." I stood there staring at my own wife, wondering what kind of nightmare this was. Tibbles made a purring sound. Not a real cat's purr. A human imitation of it, low and thick. He stretched his long limbs across the carpet and rolled onto his back. One bony leg bumped into the standing lamp hard enough to nearly tip it over. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. Yesterday at the shelter, the suit had seemed to cover everything but his face, hands, and feet. But now in my living room there was a cut opening lower down. The fabric around his crotch and rear had been sliced open. His bare body was exposed. Everything was out in the open, like it was nothing. Like it was normal. Like it was something you could bring into a home with a child. Tibbles rolled onto all fours and looked at me. "Meow," he said in a deep male voice, pitched higher to sound like a cat. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then he crawled toward me and rubbed his dirty forehead against my leg, leaving sweat and grime on my jeans. "Look, Daddy," Jenny said brightly. "Tibbles likes you." "I need a minute," I managed, and I walked away as if my legs were moving on their own. I went upstairs to my office and shut the door. My hands were shaking. My throat felt tight. I wanted to vomit. What was happening? Why couldn't they see what I saw? If this was a prank, it was too far, too cruel. And there was no way Holly would take it this far. She wouldn't bring something like that into our house and let Jenny touch it. She wouldn't, unless she truly didn't see it. I pulled out my phone. The first thought was the police, but my brain screamed another thought over it. What if I was wrong? What if I called 911 and they walked in and saw a normal cat on the rug? What if they looked at me the way Holly was looking at me, like I was the dangerous one? So I called Frank instead. Frank had been my best friend since high school. He was the person I called when I needed reality checked. When I needed another adult to say, yes, you're seeing what you think you're seeing. He didn't answer the first time. I called again, harder this time, like pressing the button could force him to pick up. Finally, he did. "What's up?" he asked, and I heard the background noise of family life. "Frank," I said, talking fast, "I'm in a situation, and I need you to tell me I'm not losing my mind." "Can this wait?" he said. "We've got my parents over for—" "No," I snapped. "It can't. There's this sick guy in a catsuit, and he's in my house with Holly and Jenny, and—" "Hold up," Frank cut in. I heard him step away from whatever he was doing. "Catsuit? What are you talking about?" I tried to explain as quickly as possible, skipping details, just hitting the main points. Shelter, man in suit. Wife brought it home. Family acting like it's a cat. Exposure, our daughter. My voice cracked with the effort. When I finished, there was a pause. "So he's there right now?" Frank asked. "Yes," I said, "and they're acting like I'm crazy." "Call the police," Frank said immediately. "Before you do, send me a picture. Evidence, if he runs, you'll have something." "Okay," I said, relieved to hear someone talk like a sane person. "I'll do that." We hung up. I stood there in my office for a second, breathing hard, then realized it had gone quiet downstairs. Too quiet. I opened the office door and stepped into the hallway. "Holly?" I called. "Jenny?" "We're downstairs, Daddy," Jenny answered. My breath eased a little. "Where's that?" I stopped myself. "Where's Tibbles?" I called down. "He's upstairs, Daddy," Jenny said. "We put the litter box in the spare room next to your office." Every hair on my arms lifted. Slowly, I turned. The hallway was dim because I hadn't turned on the lights when I ran up. My office was on the right. At the end of the hall was the spare room we used for storage. And in the half-dark, I saw two eyes staring at me from the open doorway. A huge figure squatted over a litter box. For a long moment, neither of us moved. We just stared. On all fours, he came up high, almost to my chest. His limbs were too long. His body was too tall. Even hunched, his face was nearly level with mine. He was lanky, wiry, and the suit clung to him in a way that made him look like a stretched-out animal pretending to be human, or a human pretending too hard to be an animal. And the worst part was his eyes. His eyes had always been blue, normal-looking, but before they had seemed empty, animal-like, like there was no real thought behind them. Now, standing there in the dark, he looked at me with something else. Focus, purpose, a cold awareness that made my mouth go dry. He knew I knew. There was a wet sound behind him. Thud. Something dropped into the litter box. A human bowel movement, disgusting and unmistakable. It sat there like a message, like a deliberate insult. Then he crawled toward me on all fours, slow and steady, his eyes locked on mine. The smell hit me before he reached me. Sweat, dirt, and something rotten underneath, like old blood. He got close enough that I could smell his breath. He looked up at me. "Meow," he said. I forced my hand to move. I pulled out my phone, aimed it at his face, and snapped a photo with the flash. "You see this?" I said, holding the screen up toward him like it mattered, like evidence mattered. "This is proof. I'm calling the cops. Whatever game you're playing, it's done." He just stared at the phone. "Meow," he said again. Then he crawled past me, brushing against my jeans with a dirty suit, and went down the stairs. My phone buzzed right then. Frank's name. I answered fast. "Did you get it?" I asked. "Did you see the photo?" "Yeah," Frank said slowly. "Are you okay?" "What?" My voice came out thin. "What do you mean?" "You sent me a picture of a cat," Frank said. "Just a regular cat." My whole body went numb. My arm dropped, phone still in my hand. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe right. Frank kept talking, his voice distant through the speaker. "Listen, Anne and I are worried about you. If there's anything we can do," I ended the call. Either everyone around me was playing some sick, coordinated trick, or something was wrong with my mind, and I couldn't decide which option felt more terrifying. "Honey?" Holly called from downstairs, and she sounded genuinely concerned. "Are you coming down?" I didn't know what else to do. I walked down the stairs like I was walking into court. In the living room, Holly and Jenny were on the couch. Tibbles was stretched across their laps like an oversized pet, long legs dangling off one side, and his head leaning against the armrest on the other. They were rubbing his belly, laughing when he rolled and stretched. He made that same fake purring sound. Then he raised his head and began licking Jenny's cheek with a long, wet tongue. Jenny giggled and wiped her face, calling him silly. I watched, horrified, as Holly smiled at it like it was sweet, like it was normal, like there wasn't exposed flesh near her hand, like there wasn't a grown man's body lying across my family. Something inside me snapped. Not just anger, not just fear. It was a feeling like my brain couldn't hold the pressure anymore. "That's it," I said, and my voice was calm in a way that scared even me. I walked into the hallway and grabbed the heavy iron baseball bat we kept by the umbrella stand, the one we told ourselves was for home defense even though we'd never needed it. My hands wrapped around it like it belonged there. I came back into the living room with it. Holly's face changed instantly. "What are you doing?" "Daddy, stop!" Jenny cried. "Don't hurt Tibbles." I ignored them. I grabbed the back of the suit near his collar and yanked with all my strength. He was heavy, too heavy for how thin he looked, but I surprised him. He tumbled off the couch with a harsh yowl and crashed into the coffee table, knocking it over. Before he hit the floor, he twisted. Then he landed on his feet. It was the way a cat would land. I raised the bat. "Stay away from my family," I said, teeth clenched. "Get out of my house." Tibbles hissed. He showed dirty yellow teeth. Thick saliva dripped onto our carpet. The sound that came out of him was wrong, too deep for a cat, but too high for a man. He swiped at my leg with long, cracked nails, caked with dirt, and something dark. He missed. I swung the bat. He jerked back with quick reflexes, quick enough that for half a second my brain tried to accept the impossible. He lunged again, and I swung again. This time the bat connected with his arm at the elbow with a dull, solid thud. He screamed. Not like a human scream, not like an animal either, but something in between. He crawled backward, cradling the arm, eyes fixed on me with hatred. Then he turned and fled into the kitchen. I heard the back door slam open. I heard bare feet slap across the patio outside, quick and frantic, and then he was gone. I stood there breathing hard, bat lowered, adrenaline flooding my body so fast I felt dizzy. I turned to Holly and Jenny, expecting their faces to change, expecting them to suddenly see what I saw, expecting relief, gratitude, something. They stared at me like I'd just done something unforgivable. Then Jenny screamed, "No, Tibbles," and ran into the hallway sobbing. Holly stood up so fast, her knees hit the coffee table's edge. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted. Her face was red with anger and fear. "You've been acting crazy all day. You just scared our daughter and chased away our cat." The bat slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a heavy clank. I could hear Jenny's small footsteps pounding toward the front door as she yelled Tibble's name out into the street. Holly kept yelling, but the words blurred into noise. I couldn't fight back. I didn't even know how. All I knew was that one of us had finally crossed the line into madness. That night shattered the calm in our home. Holly demanded I go outside with her and help look for our cat. I refused. There was no way I was walking into the dark searching for that thing, not after what I'd seen. Our argument was the worst we'd ever had. It wasn't even a fair fight. In Holly's version of reality, I was a man who had snapped and attacked an innocent pet for no reason. She told me she wasn't comfortable leaving Jenny alone with me if I was going to behave like that. She said she would take Jenny to stay with her parents and that I needed to see a therapist. She said, very clearly, that if I didn't get help, I might not see them for a long time. I didn't have a defense. Because what was I supposed to say? It's not a cat. It's a man in a catsuit. Words don't mean anything if two people aren't living in the same world. After Holly and Jenny left, I called in sick to work. I wandered through the empty house like a ghost. I sat on the couch, I paced, I stared at the walls. I spent hours online looking for anything that could explain what was happening to me. I tried searching for local news about some man in a catsuit. Nothing. I tried forums, weird websites, anything. I ended up reading about shapeshifters, curses, demons, mass hallucination, mental illness. At 1 a.m, I realized what I was doing. I wasn't finding answers. I was running from the simplest possibility. Maybe something was wrong with my mind. The thought terrified me. I'd never hallucinated before. I didn't have a history of anything like that. But I also couldn't explain the photo Frank received. If I had taken a picture of a man and my friend saw a cat, what did that mean? Was my phone lying too? Or was my brain changing what I saw even on a screen? I shut my laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the house settle. I promised myself I would call a psychiatrist first thing in the morning. Whatever was happening, I wanted it fixed. I wanted Holly and Jenny back. I wanted my life back. I went to bed alone in our cold room and tried to sleep. I was just starting to drift off when I heard scratching at the front door. I opened my eyes. For a moment, I lay still, listening. Wind in the trees. A distant car. Silence. Then the scratching came again, sharper and more urgent. I got up and moved into the hallway as quietly as I could. My heart pounded in my throat. I went to the stairs and lowered myself down slowly, peering through the wooden railing into the front hall. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see the outline of a tall figure standing outside. The scratching grew frantic, like nails dragging against the door, like something trying to get in. I froze. Part of me wanted to confront it. Part of me wanted to run back upstairs, bury my head under a pillow, and pretend this wasn't real. I shifted my weight, and my foot slipped. I fell down the stairs. I hit hard, pain exploding in my ankle. I bit back a cry. I grabbed the railing and dragged myself up enough to look toward the front door. The shadow was gone. The scratching stopped. My breath came out shaky. I told myself it was over. I told myself I'd imagined the shadow. Maybe it was a tree branch. Maybe it was nothing. I limped to the door, grabbed the keys from the counter, and unlocked it. Cold night air hit my face. Our street was empty, lit by streetlights. No moon, no voices, no movement. The neighborhood looked asleep. I stood there a moment, the door open, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Then, I stepped forward, one foot onto the porch. My bare foot touched something warm, wet, and furry. I recoiled with disgust and lost my balance because of the injured ankle, falling backward onto the hallway floor. When I looked, my stomach dropped. A dead rat lay on the porch in a pool of fresh blood. A huge bite had torn into its back, ripping away flesh. It wasn't the neat kill of a normal cat. Whatever had done it had a mouth much bigger than that. I scrambled up, slammed the door shut, and locked it. The sound echoed through the empty house. I'd read about this feeling in horror stories, the sense of being hunted, of being watched by something you can't see. I understood now that reading about it and living it are not the same thing. Tibbles was back. Then I heard the back door creak open. I swore out loud. In my panic earlier, I'd forgotten to lock it. I grabbed the baseball bat from the umbrella stand with shaking hands and moved into the living room to give myself space. My injured ankle throbbed. The house felt too open, too full of hiding places. I heard footsteps on the kitchen tile. Not soft cat steps. Slow, deliberate, bare footsteps. I stared at the kitchen doorway as if staring could keep him from coming through. He appeared. He was standing upright now, so tall he had to duck slightly under the doorway. His catsuit looked worse than before, caked in new dirt and dark stains. His mouth and beard were smeared with something thick and wet, the same dark color that glistened at the corner of his lips. His body was exposed in a way that made my skin crawl. There was no shame in it, no attempt to cover himself, like the idea of decency had never applied to him. But it was his eyes that made my blood run cold. They were fixed on me with that same purposeful, knowing malice, human and animal at the same time, like he understood fear and enjoyed it. Back for more? I forced out. My voice sounded rough in the quiet room. I knew I couldn't outrun him, not with my ankle. But anger rose anyway, hot and protective, because I kept seeing Jenny's face and that thing on our couch. He bent his knees slightly like an athlete preparing to sprint. Then he launched himself at me. He hit me with enough force to knock me down hard. The bat flew out of my hands, clanging across the floor beyond reach. The air punched out of my lungs. I gasped and tasted his breath immediately, sweat and old blood and rot. He pinned me with his weight like a heavy animal. He growled low, the sound vibrating through him and into me. I tried to shove him off, but he was too strong. He lifted himself just enough to sit on me, and for a second I thought I had room to breathe. Then his nails came down. They weren't sharp like a cat's claws, but they were long and filthy, and the strength behind them turned them into weapons. He raked at my arms and chest. I felt fabric tear. Then, skin. Hot pain spread across me. I fought, grabbing at his wrists, managing to stop the worst of it for a moment. He wrestled free, and then grabbed my wrists instead, pinning my hands down beside my head. His face dropped close to mine. His breath was hot. I could see saliva at the edges of his mouth. I knew what he was going to do, the way you know a car is about to hit you when you hear the engine and there's nowhere to run. He opened his mouth and bit into my neck. Pain exploded, bright and blinding. I tried to scream, but only a weak wheeze came out. Blood flooded into my mouth, metallic and warm. My vision blurred at the edges. He held on like a predator, crushing my throat. He made a soft sound, almost satisfied, almost amused, like a private laugh. Then his grip on my wrists loosened for a fraction of a second, like he was enjoying the moment too much. It was enough. My keys were still in my pajama pocket. I clawed them out with shaking fingers and drove one of them upward with all the strength I had left. The metal jammed into his eye. He released me instantly with a scream that didn't sound human. He thrashed back, hands clapping over his face. I coughed, gurgling, trying to breathe through a damaged throat. I pressed my hand against the wound, feeling blood soak through my fingers. Tibbles stumbled and flailed, knocking furniture over, nails scraping the floor as he howled. I saw the bat lying in the corner of the room. I crawled to it, dragging my body, my hand still on my neck. Every breath felt like swallowing knives. I grabbed the bat and forced myself up, dizzy and shaking. Tibbles was in the corner, clutching his ruined eye. His sounds had turned into a wet, agonized whimper. He looked up at me with one good eye full of hatred so pure it felt unreal. I lifted the bat, and I brought it down on his head. The crack was sickening. I hit him again, and again, and again, until he stopped moving. Then I hit him more, because my mind couldn't accept that it was over, because I couldn't take the risk, because the thought of him getting back up made me want to crawl out of my own skin. When I finally stopped, my arm dropped useless at my side. The bat slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a dull clank. I found my phone and called 911. I could barely speak. My voice was wet and broken. But the dispatcher understood enough to send help. Sirens grew louder in the distance, and when they finally reached our street, relief washed over me so hard I almost cried. Then, everything went dark. I passed out on the living room floor. I wish I could say that was the end. That the police came, saw what I saw, and the world snapped back into place. That Holly apologized. That Jenny understood. That we healed. That isn't what happened. The damage to my throat and vocal cords never fully healed. From that night on, my voice was reduced to a rough whisper. Talking felt like pushing words through sandpaper. When I woke up in the hospital, Holly was there. She looked relieved that I was alive, but behind the relief was fear and confusion. For years, I had been the steady one, the person she trusted to be rational. Now, she looked at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. The official story became a psychotic episode, a breakdown, an accident caused by a mind snapping under stress. It didn't explain the torn throat or the deep scratches, but the medical staff wrote what they could write, and the police did what they could do with what they could see. They never found Tibbles. When officers arrived, they found only me, bleeding and unconscious. There was no huge body in a dirty catsuit. No evidence of a violent fight besides a wrecked living room and my injuries. No proof that an intruder had ever been there. After I was discharged, I was admitted to a mental health facility. I didn't argue. I didn't fight it. I said yes to the medication, yes to therapy, yes to anything they suggested, because I didn't know what else to do. If Tibbles was something my mind created, I wanted him gone. If Tibbles was real, then I needed people to believe I was stable enough to be with my family again. I was released after a few weeks with prescriptions and a treatment plan. I came home groggy, my thoughts wrapped in cotton from the meds. Holly and Jenny were downstairs playing, trying to build something normal out of the rubble. The plan to get Jenny a pet was put on hold indefinitely. Nobody said it out loud, but it hung in the air. We were trying to return to normal, and nobody trusted what normal meant anymore. I sat alone at night a lot, listening to the house, trying to trust my senses again. The worst part wasn't even the fear. It was the isolation. It was knowing that something had happened to me, and that when I tried to share it, the world looked back at me and saw only illness. It was being unable to lean on other people's certainty because my reality and theirs didn't match. So I did what they told me. I took my medication. I went to every appointment. I tried to be the version of myself everyone needed. And I tried not to look too closely at what kept appearing on my porch. Dead rats, left near the door in fresh blood. Rats with huge chunks torn out of them, bites far too large for any normal cat. I cleaned them up without telling Holly. I threw them into trash bags and tied them tight. And each time, before I washed my hands, I stood at the sink and listened to the quiet house and wondered if the only reason I was still alive was because whatever was out there hadn't decided to come inside again yet. Story 2 a week ago, the Monday after my birthday, I woke up late with my head thick and my mouth tasting like old alcohol. I'd been out the night before, the kind of birthday night where you tell yourself you'll take it easy and then somehow you're still drinking at midnight. I stumbled into the bathroom, already rehearsing excuses for my boss. My eyes were half open, and everything felt slightly tilted, like the room wasn't fully steady yet. I started brushing my teeth and looked up at the mirror without thinking. Blonde, shaggy hair, tired blue eyes. That faint shadow of a beard I always pretend I don't see until it's too late and I look like I've been living in my car. The same face I've had for years. I remember thinking I should shave soon, but something about it felt off. Not, oh, I look rough today, but like something wasn't lining up. Like the picture was almost correct, but not quite. A wrong note in a familiar song. I told myself I was still drunk, or still asleep, or just being weird because it was Monday. I showered, shaved, threw on my work clothes, and rushed out the door at 9:15 a.m. I was supposed to clock in at 9:00. My boss gave me the usual disappointed look and the mild scolding that says, "You're not in serious trouble, but don't make this a habit." I dropped into my chair at my desk, trying to pretend my brain wasn't still floating. From the desk across from mine, Luke, my best friend and coworker, grinned like it was Christmas. "Party boy's late," he said. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, Luke looked annoyingly fresh for a Monday. Not just awake, but energized. It didn't match the weekend we'd all had. "Why are you so happy today?" I asked. "You don't even look like you spent the weekend partying." He made a show of leaning back in his chair. "Hush, hush. That's a trade secret. Now go do your work, you slacker." He actually winked like an idiot. "I'm late one day, and now I'm a slacker?" I said. "Okay, what should I call you then? I can't see you, I can't hear you," he sang, facing his screen like I didn't exist. I sighed and got to work, because I really do hate Mondays. The day dragged in that familiar way. Emails, spreadsheets, little pointless tasks that still somehow mattered. The office had that stale air it always has after a weekend, like nobody's lungs have fully woken up yet. At lunch, Luke brought up the suit fitting. His older brother was getting married in a few weeks, and Luke and I were both groomsmen. We'd been talking about the wedding for months, mostly Luke complaining about costs and his brother acting like the whole thing was a military operation. "When are we going for the fitting?" Luke asked, mouth full of whatever he was eating. What about Wednesday? I said. We have the afternoon off. Perfect, he said, grinning like it was the best news he'd heard all day. I forgot about the mirror by the time Wednesday came. I didn't completely forget the weird feeling from Monday morning, but it had faded into the normal background anxiety of life. The kind of thought you dismiss because you don't want to give it a place to live. We went to the fitting after lunch. The place smelled like fabric and cologne and that sharp chemical cleaner shops use on everything. The tailor took measurements like he was building me from scratch. Luke joked around the whole time. I was mostly just happy to be out of the office. Eventually, they brought out my custom navy blue suit for me to try on. It actually looked good, which surprised me. I'm not someone who feels natural in formal clothes, but the fit was clean and sharp. I stepped in front of the mirror to look at myself, adjusting the jacket, checking the shoulders, the sleeves, all the things people pretend to care about. That's when the reflection moved wrong. Not me. The mirror itself. It rippled, just for a second, like someone had dropped a pebble into the glass. The image of my face and suit warped in a smooth wave and then snapped back to normal. I froze with my hands still on the lapels. What? I whispered. It didn't happen again. The reflection was fine. My face was my face. The suit was the suit. Everything looked normal enough that my brain tried to swallow what I'd just seen. I blinked hard like I could reset my eyes. Nothing from outside the fitting room. Luke called. Noah, you done trying it on? I'll be right out, I yelled back, voice slightly higher than I meant. My heart felt like it had sped up without permission. I didn't want to stand in front of that mirror anymore. I didn't even know why, but the urge to step away from it was strong and immediate. I changed back into my clothes fast, like the room itself was making me nervous. When I stepped out, Luke was still talking, still laughing, completely normal. I forced myself to act normal, too. I told myself it was lighting, stress, lack of sleep. A weird angle, anything, but that ripple stayed in my mind like an afterimage. The weekend came quickly. Saturday was my lazy day, the day I don't set alarms and don't answer anything unless it's important. So when I woke up at 3 a.m., to a loud clatter from the bathroom, I was already irritated before I was even fully conscious. Something had fallen. A bottle, maybe, a shampoo container, something plastic hitting tile. I groaned into my pillow and said, Max, come here, boy. Max is my dog. He knocks stuff over all the time. Normally, if I call him, he trots in with that guilty look, like he knows he's annoying, but he also knows I love him. Then, my stomach dropped, because I remembered Max wasn't even in the house. Max was at the vet. He'd been there since Thursday. So if something had fallen in my bathroom, it wasn't my dog. I sat up slowly, every nerve waking all at once. In the dark, my room suddenly felt too open, like there was more space than there should be. I thought, burglar. It wasn't a dramatic thought. It was simple and cold. Someone was inside. I reached under my bed and pulled out the baseball bat I keep there. I'd always told myself it was for peace of mind, not because I actually expected to use it. In that moment, it felt stupidly light in my hands, like it wasn't enough. I got out of bed and moved toward the bathroom in small steps. The hallway was dark. The bathroom door was slightly open, a black gap. I tightened my grip on the bat and flipped the bathroom light switch. The lights snapped on. The bathroom was empty. No person, no shadow moving behind the shower curtain, no open window, no mess on the floor. Nothing looked disturbed. I stood there, breathing hard, listening, trying to hear anything besides my own pulse. I couldn't even tell what had made the noise. Everything seemed to be where it belonged. I was still standing there when a thought slid into my mind, clear as a whisper. Look at the mirror. It didn't feel like my own thought. It felt like someone speaking directly into the center of my head, calm and confident, like it knew I would listen. I had been avoiding mirrors since Wednesday without even really admitting it to myself. I'd brush my teeth and keep my eyes down. I'd walk past reflective windows without looking. It was subtle, but it was there. Now my eyes drifted upward anyway, like I didn't have a choice. The mirror looked normal. No ripples, no distortions. But that same wrong feeling crawled up my spine, the sense that something wasn't matching. I leaned closer before I could stop myself. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to back away and leave the bathroom, but curiosity pulled me forward like a hook. I studied my reflection. My hair was a mess. My eyes were wide. My face looked pale under the harsh bathroom light. It was me. Then I saw it. The tiny scar on my jaw. I've had it for years. I know exactly where it is, like a landmark on a map. It's on the right side. In the mirror, it was on the left. For a second, my brain tried to correct it like it was a trick of angles. But it wasn't. It was clean and clear as day. A scar in the wrong place on my own face. My throat went dry. Slowly, I raised my hand and touched my right jaw, fingertips moving over the real scar. In the mirror, the reflection raised its hand too, but not in perfect sync. It hesitated, just a fraction, like it had to think about what I was doing, like it wasn't copying me as naturally as it should have. And in that tiny hesitation, I knew with a cold certainty that the thing in the mirror wasn't me. It realized its mistake too. It stopped mimicking me. The reflection's arm lowered slightly while mine stayed pressed to my jaw. The face in the mirror looked at me with a focus that felt sharp and wrong, like it was seeing through my skin and into whatever was underneath. Then it spoke, not with its mouth exactly. I can't explain it better than this. The words arrived inside my head the same way the earlier whisper had. I'm coming for you, Noah. That was it. Simple, calm, like a promise. Everything after that is flashes. I remember the bat slipping in my hands as my body went hot with fear. I remember a loud crack, and the mirror exploding outward as I swung without thinking. I remember glass fragments scattering across the sink and tile. I remember backing away, nearly slipping, and then turning and running like something was chasing me even though I couldn't hear footsteps. I grabbed my car keys and my phone, and I bolted out of the house. I didn't stop to lock the door. I didn't even put shoes on properly. My brain had narrowed down to one goal: get away from any reflection that could hold me. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot because it was lit, and there were other cars, and it felt less like being alone in the dark. I crawled into the back seat of my car and sat there trying to breathe quietly, heart hammering. At some point, I looked up and saw my side view mirrors. They were reflecting the parking lot lights, the empty spaces, the faint outline of my face if I shifted the wrong way. And I panicked again. I got out and I broke them. I smashed both side mirrors until there was nothing left that could show me anything but jagged fragments. I didn't care what I looked like. I didn't care what anyone thought. I just needed to destroy anything that could become a doorway. Now I'm sitting in the back seat again, knees pulled up, phone in my hands. The screen is dark enough that I can see a faint reflection sometimes, depending on the angle. Not like a real mirror, but enough to make my stomach twist. And I keep thinking, is that enough? Does it need a mirror, or does it just need a surface that can show my face? I know I sound insane. I know how this reads. But I'm not making it up. If anyone has advice, I need it. Real advice. Practical advice. Because I don't know what to do next. I can't go back to my house. Not like this. I can't walk into a bathroom and look down and pretend nothing happened. I can't sleep knowing there are mirrors in every room, in every store, in every window after dark. And the worst part is that it used my name. It didn't say hey or you. It said Noah. Like it's been here longer than I've noticed. Like it's been watching me through glass for a long time. And now it's done waiting. Story 3, I know this is going to sound unbelievable, but I need someone to hear me out. I live in a small town on a small island just off the coast of mainland Alaska. It is the kind of place most people only visit for a few hours while their cruise ship is docked. To tourists, it looks like a quiet little postcard town, full of pine trees, cold ocean air, gift shops, fishing boats, and pretty mountain views. To the people who actually live here, it is home. It is also cramped, isolated, and hard to leave when something goes wrong. Every year, cruise season changes everything. For a few months, the island stops feeling like ours. Huge ships come in, one after another, and unload thousands of people into our streets. Some locals hate it. They hate the noise, the crowds, the trash left on the trails, and the tourists who act like the whole island is a theme park built just for them. Other locals love it because those same tourists keep their businesses alive. Hotels, souvenir shops, restaurants, fishing tours, coffee stands. Everyone makes most of their money when the ships are here. I have always been somewhere in the middle. I understand both sides. I hate watching people wander off marked paths, scare wildlife, throw wrappers near the beach, and complain about how slow island life is. But I also own a small coffee shop in the middle of town, and I would be lying if I said we did not depend on those visitors. During cruise season, the money we make can carry us through the colder, quieter months. So as much as I roll my eyes when a group of tourists blocks the sidewalk to take the same photo everyone else takes, I still smile, make their coffee, and tell them where to find the best view of the harbor. That is the only background you really need. 2 days ago, a massive cruise ship came in. It was one of the largest I had seen all season, tall enough to make the buildings near the dock look like toys. It was supposed to stay for most of the day, let people wander around, spend money, take pictures, eat lunch, and then leave before evening. That was normal. What was not normal was what happened shortly after it arrived. Somehow, the ship damaged the fiber optic cable that provides both internet and phone service to most of the island. I know that sounds like the kind of thing that should be rare, but it happens more often than people think. We are isolated out here, and a lot of our services come through vulnerable lines. One accident, one bad anchor, one careless mistake, and suddenly, everyone is cut off. Usually, it is annoying but manageable. People complain, the repair crews get called, and for a while, we all go back to living like it is 20 years ago. This time felt different. The island went dark almost immediately after the ship arrived. Phones stopped working, card machines stopped connecting. Internet went out all over town. Most businesses could not take payments unless people had cash, and most tourists never carry enough cash. I expected my coffee shop to be flooded with angry visitors asking why their cards were not going through, why they could not call anyone, why the Wi-Fi was not working, and why I personally had not fixed it yet. But no one came. That was the first strange thing. The ship was full. I had seen people coming off it earlier. The streets should have been packed. Even without internet, there should have been confused tourists wandering around, looking for signs, asking locals for help, complaining loudly, trying to get directions back to the dock. Instead, the town was oddly quiet. At first, I thought maybe everyone had gone back to the ship once they realized the service was down. That would have made sense. Maybe the crew warned them. Maybe the cruise line made an announcement. Maybe the shops near the dock told everyone it was better to return before things became inconvenient. But the cruise ship did not leave. It stayed there, sitting in the harbor like a black wall against the gray sky. I still had internet because I used Starlink at home. I got it last year after one too many outages ruined my ability to handle business orders and banking. It is expensive, but out here, it is worth it. So while most of the island was cut off, I could still access the outside world from my apartment. I wish that made me feel safer. It did not. Last night, something woke me up. At first, I thought it was the storm. We get nasty storms around this time of year, and I am used to being woken up by rain hammering against the windows or thunder rolling over the island. The wind can get loud enough to shake the glass in its frame. Sometimes the whole building groans like it is tired of standing. I opened my eyes and lay still in the dark, listening. Rain hit the windows in hard bursts. Wind moved around the corners of the building. Somewhere far away, thunder rumbled over the water. I stared at the ceiling, annoyed and exhausted, hoping the storm would pass quickly so I could get back to sleep. Then I heard it again. It was not thunder. It was not wind. It was humming. At first, it was low, almost gentle. A deep, steady sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It did not sound like a song. It did not even sound fully human. It was more like a vibration, a long note held by too many voices at the same time. The sound made my stomach twist. I do not know how else to explain it. I felt it more than I heard it. It seemed to settle inside my bones. My teeth ached from it. The hair on my arms stood up, and for a few seconds, I just lay there, trying to convince myself I was still dreaming. But I was awake. The humming grew louder. I sat up slowly. My bedroom was dark except for the faint gray light coming through the curtains. The power was still on, but I had not turned on any lights. I remember thinking that I should, but something in me did not want to make myself visible. I got out of bed and walked to the window. My apartment is on the 6th floor of a building near the center of town. That gives me a good view of the main road, the nearby shops, and part of the pine forest that presses close against the edge of town. During the day, the forest looks beautiful. At night, especially during storms, it looks like a wall of black teeth. I pulled the curtain back just enough to look out. The town was dark below. Because of the outage, there were fewer lights than usual. Some buildings had generators, a few windows glowed here and there, but most of the street was covered in rain and shadow. Water ran along the gutters. Signs swung in the wind. The road shone under the faint light from a few working lamps. The humming continued. It was louder now. Or maybe there were more voices making it. That thought made my skin crawl. I looked toward the forest. At first I saw nothing except dark trees bending in a storm. Then, a green glow appeared between the trunks. It was faint at first, like light seen underwater. Then it grew stronger. More patches of green appeared behind it, moving slowly through the trees. For one strange second, I thought of the bioluminescent algae that sometimes blooms in the water during summer. If you have never seen it, it looks like the ocean is glowing from the inside. Beautiful, almost magical. But this was not in the water. This glow was moving through the forest. And then I realized It was attached to people. They came out from between the pine trees in a loose group, walking toward the street below my building. There were maybe 20 of them at first, though more seemed to be behind them. Their clothes were wet and clinging to their bodies. Some wore rain jackets, some wore tourist hoodies. One woman had a plastic poncho stuck to her shoulders. Another man still had a camera hanging from his neck. They looked like tourists. At least, they used to. The green light clung to them in patches. It covered their arms, their throats, their faces, their hands. It shone from their open mouths and from the wet skin around their eyes. It looked almost like something living had grown over them. Something bright and slick and unnatural. As they walked, they hummed in perfect rhythm. That was when real fear hit me. I do not know why that sight scared me so badly. They were just people, at least from a distance. But something deep inside me reacted before I could think. Some old animal part of my brain screamed that what I was looking at was wrong. Dangerous. The kind of thing you do not approach. The kind of thing you run from. But I did not run. I stood frozen at the window, unable to move. The group reached the street. Rain poured over them, but they did not seem to notice. They did not look around like normal people lost in a storm. They moved with purpose, slow, steady, and all together. The humming continued, rising and falling, making the glass in my window faintly vibrate. I almost called out. I do not know what I thought I was going to say. Maybe I wanted to ask if they needed help. Maybe some stupid, normal part of my brain still wanted this to be explainable. Maybe they were sick. Maybe there had been some kind of chemical spill. Maybe they were passengers from the cruise ship and needed medical help. Before I could open the window, someone else shouted first. Across the street, the front door of a ground-floor apartment slammed open. A man stepped out into the rain wearing sweatpants and a jacket pulled over a t-shirt. I recognized him vaguely. I think he worked at one of the repair shops near the marina. He was angry, probably half asleep, and clearly had no idea what he had just walked into. For crying out loud, he shouted into the street. Do you know what time it is? Knock it off. Some of us have to work. His words cut through the humming. For 1 second, the glowing people stopped. All of them turned their heads toward him at the same time. I will never forget that. Not one by one. Not naturally. Every head moved together, like they were all connected by the same string. The man must have realized something was wrong, because his anger disappeared from his face. He took 1 step back toward his open door. He was too late. One of the glowing people broke away from the group and charged him. It was a woman. She moved fast, much faster than she should have. Her wet shoes slapped against the pavement as she sprinted through the rain. The man barely had time to raise his hands before she crashed into him. They both hit the ground hard. Then she started biting him. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. I thought she was punching him, maybe clawing at him. Then his scream cut through the storm, and I saw her head jerking downward again and again. She was biting his face, his neck, his shoulder. He kicked and struggled, trying to push her off, but more of them were already moving. The group rushed toward the open door. I do not know why I did what I did next. Maybe panic, maybe instinct. Maybe I thought if they got inside that building, everyone in there would die. I threw open my balcony door and stepped into the rain. The humming hit me like pressure against my chest. Outside, it was much louder, a thick, vibrating sound that seemed to wrap around the whole town. I grabbed the first thing I could reach, a heavy, potted plant sitting near the balcony railing. "Hey," I yelled. My voice sounded small against the storm. I lifted the pot and threw it over the edge. It dropped 6 stories and smashed on the pavement between the glowing group and the open doorway. The ceramic exploded. Dirt and pieces of plant scattered across the street. Half of the group stopped. Then they looked up at me. I stumbled backward so fast I nearly fell. The people below changed direction. They ran toward my building. Their humming became louder, sharper, almost excited. I heard their feet pounding against the wet street. Then came the sound of bodies hitting the front door downstairs. Bang, 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 the entire building seemed to shake with each impact. They were not knocking. They were throwing themselves against the lobby entrance like wild animals. I could hear hands slapping the glass, fists hitting metal, nails scraping, bodies pressing forward again and again. I backed into my apartment and slammed the balcony doors shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock it. I pulled the curtains closed, then stood in the middle of the room, breathing hard. The lobby door was locked. Only residents had keys. It was thick glass and metal. It should hold. I kept telling myself that. It should hold. It should hold. But the sounds from below kept coming. Bang, bang, bang. Then the screaming started. Not from the glowing people. From inside the town. People were waking up. People were seeing what was outside. I heard a woman screaming somewhere down the block. Then another voice shouted for help. A car alarm went off. Somewhere in the distance, glass shattered. The humming spread beneath it all. It kept getting louder. I locked my apartment door. Then I flipped the deadbolt. Then I dragged a chair over and wedged it under the handle, even though I knew how useless that probably was. My apartment is 6 floors up, but that thought no longer comforted me. The people outside had not moved like normal people. They had not reacted like normal people, and the green glow was spreading. I saw it before I closed the curtains completely. More lights were coming out of the trees. More figures were walking from the forest. Some came from the direction of the dock, too. That was the part that made my blood run cold. The cruise ship. I could not see it clearly from my apartment, but I could see a faint green shimmer in the distance where the harbor should have been dark. I think something came off that ship. Or maybe something came out of the water when it cut the cable. I do not know. I do not even know if anyone outside the island knows something is wrong here. Most of us have no phone service, no internet, no way to call for help. The radios might work, but I do not have one. The police station is only a few blocks away, but I have not heard sirens. I have not heard gunshots. I have not heard anything that makes me think anyone is in control. Just screams. Just rain. Just that humming. I am writing this from my apartment with the lights off. My laptop is connected through Starlink, and it is the only reason I can still reach the outside world. I have pushed my couch against the door now. I also filled the bathtub with water because I do not know how long this is going to last. I grabbed a kitchen knife, but it feels stupid in my hand. If those people get inside, I do not think a knife will save me. They are still downstairs, not all of them. Some have moved on. I can hear them in the streets. But a few are still at my building entrance. Every few minutes, the banging starts again. Then it stops. Then the humming rises, like they are listening for something. A few minutes ago, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. I do not know how someone got in. Maybe a resident opened the lobby door. Maybe the glass broke. Maybe one of them had a key. The footsteps moved slowly past my door. Whoever it was stopped right outside. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. The green light came through the crack under the door, faint but real, glowing against the wooden floor. Then the humming started right outside my apartment. Soft, patient, like whoever stood there knew I was inside. I did not move. I did not breathe. After a while, the footsteps continued down the hall. But I can still hear them, somewhere on this floor. I think they are going door to door. I do not know what is happening. I do not know if this is some kind of sickness, some kind of parasite, something from the ocean, or something that was never supposed to be found. All I know is that the island is dark, the tourists are not acting human anymore, and the green glow is spreading through town. If anyone has heard anything about something strange happening in Alaska, please tell me. If anyone can contact the Coast Guard, the police, the military, anyone, please do it. Please. The humming just stopped outside my door. And now someone is scratching at the lock. Story 4, I got home from work a little after 4 in the morning. I had just finished a long shift at one of the local bars in town, and by the time I pushed my apartment door open, my whole body felt heavy. My feet hurt, my back ached, and my head had that tired, buzzing feeling you get when you have been around loud music, drunk customers, and bright lights for too many hours. All I wanted was to sleep. The good thing was that I had the next day off. I had been thinking about it through the last half of my shift, almost using it as a reason to keep going. My plan was simple. I was going to sleep until the afternoon, order pizza, watch movies, and then go back to bed whenever I felt like it. No alarms, no people, no responsibilities. Just one quiet day where nobody needed anything from me. I kicked off my shoes near the door, changed into old sweatpants, and fell into bed without even caring that the sun would be coming up soon. I remember pulling the blanket over myself and feeling safe in that warm, dark space. After that, I was gone. I do not know how long I slept before my phone woke me up. It was not my normal alarm. My normal alarm was annoying, but this sound was different. It was louder, sharper, and somehow more serious. It cut through my sleep like a siren. I sat straight up in bed with my heart already racing, like my body had understood the danger before my mind had any chance to catch up. For a second, I thought someone was in the room. I looked around wildly, still half asleep, expecting something to grab me by the ankles and drag me out from under the covers. But the room was empty. The only thing moving was my phone on the nightstand, vibrating so hard that it was slowly sliding toward the edge. I grabbed it with shaking hands and blinked the sleep out of my eyes. At first, the screen was just a blur of light and red letters. Then my vision cleared, and I saw the emergency alert spread across my home screen. Stay inside. That was all it said at first. Just those 2 words, huge and red, taking up most of the screen. No explanation, no details, no location, no this is a test. Nothing that made it feel normal. Just a warning that sounded less like advice and more like an order. I stared at it for a long moment. My heart started beating faster and faster, and all kinds of thoughts rushed into my head at once. Was there a chemical leak? A shooting? A storm? Some kind of attack? Had something happened downtown? Had someone escaped from somewhere? The words were so simple, but that made them worse. Stay inside could mean anything, and every possibility my mind came up with was worse than the last. The most obvious thing to do was open the curtains and look outside. My bedroom window faced the street below, and from there I could see a good part of town. But the second I thought about pulling the curtains open, I froze. Before that moment, those curtains had only been curtains. They blocked the morning sun when I wanted to sleep late. They gave me privacy from the people in the apartments across the street. But now they felt different. They felt like a thin wall between me and whatever the warning was trying to keep outside. I stood there, looking at them, and I suddenly had the terrible feeling that something might be waiting just on the other side. I did not open them. Instead, I sat back down on the bed and started checking my phone. I went straight to social media because that is what people do now when something terrible happens. It was stupid, but I wanted someone else to explain it to me. I wanted to see people joking about it, or complaining, or saying it was some kind of mistake. I wanted proof that I was overreacting. But everything I found made me feel worse. Posts were appearing and disappearing almost at the same time. People were asking what was happening outside. They were asking if anyone else had seen the dust. Some asked if their family members were okay. Some wrote things like, "Do not open your doors," or "Do not let them in." But before I could read more, the posts vanished. One after another, they were removed. It was like someone was watching every word and deleting anything that mentioned what was going on. I searched different tags. I searched the name of my town. I searched emergency alert, dust, gray powder, people outside, festival. Every time something came up, it was gone within seconds. Then I found one short video. It was only a few seconds long before it disappeared, but I saw enough to make my stomach twist. The video had been filmed in the center of town. I recognized the street right away. There had been a summer festival going on that weekend, and I could see people standing around in the warm daylight. Some were holding drinks. Some had food in their hands. A few children were pointing up. Above them, something was falling from the sky. At first, it looked like ash. Then I realized it was lighter than that, almost like powder. It drifted down slowly in soft gray clouds, falling over the street and over the people who were looking up at it. They did not run at first. They seemed confused. A few people laughed nervously. A few backed away. Then the video cut off, and when I tried to play it again, it was gone. That tiny piece of footage was enough. My body felt cold even under the blanket. I wrapped myself up again, trying to get back the safe feeling I had before the alert woke me, but it was gone. I sat there in bed and stared at the curtains, feeling like they were staring back at me. The fear of not knowing was worse than anything I could see. It sat inside my chest and tightened around my lungs. Part of me wanted to look outside and get it over with. Another part of me was convinced that if I opened the curtains, I would see something I could never forget. Then I thought of Sarah. Sarah was my roommate. She was not exactly my best friend, but we got along well enough. We worked different hours, shared rent, and mostly stayed out of each other's way. She was the kind of person who would roll her eyes at my panic and tell me to calm down. Right then, I needed that. I needed someone to tell me I was being dramatic, that it was just some emergency test or a weird weather thing. I got up and walked to her bedroom door. I knocked softly at first, then harder. There was no answer. I opened the door a little and called her name, but the room was empty. The apartment was dark and quiet. I moved through the hallway, then into the kitchen, where I flicked on the light. That was when I saw the note on the counter. "Hey, heard you were still sleeping, so I'm going to get some food. Text me if you need anything. Be back soon." Sarah, I stared at the note for a few seconds, and then my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from Sarah. Coming back now. Please open the door. Forgot my keys. I read it once, then twice, then again. In any normal situation, I would have laughed, walked to the door, and let her in. But nothing about that morning felt normal anymore. In the last 15 minutes, I had seen an emergency alert, disappearing posts, and a video of gray dust falling on people downtown. I had no idea what was outside. I had no idea what had happened to Sarah. Then came the knock. Knock, knock. The sound was soft, but it still made me jump. I stood in the kitchen with the note in one hand and my phone in the other, staring toward the front door. The apartment had never felt so silent. Even the refrigerator sounded too loud. Sarah was outside. That should have made me feel better. She could tell me what was happening. She could explain the alert. She could tell me if people were overreacting or if the whole town had lost its mind. All I had to do was unlock the door. So why was I shaking? Knock, knock, can you let me in? She called from the other side. It was her voice. I knew it was her voice. But something was wrong with it. It sounded dry and strained, like she had been screaming for a long time, or like it hurt her to speak. There was a rough edge in every word. I tried to tell myself she was just scared. Maybe she had been running. Maybe the dust was smoke, and she had breathed some in. Still, I did not open the door. I picked up my keys from the small table by the entrance and held them against my chest so tightly that the edges pressed into my skin. Sorry, I called back, trying to sound normal. I'm trying to find my keys. How was town? Did anything happen while you were out? There was a pause. It was fine, she said. The words were short and sharp. There was anger in them now. Not normal anger, either. It sounded like she was trying very hard to stay calm, and something underneath her voice was pushing to get out. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. Did you see the alert? I asked. For a few seconds, she did not answer. Those seconds stretched out until I thought I might scream. Then she said, "Oh, that was just a test." They said on the news they were doing that, right? Her tone had changed. Suddenly, she sounded light, almost friendly. But it was too sudden. It felt like a performance, like someone had remembered how a normal person was supposed to sound and was trying to copy it. The fear inside me grew colder. I stepped closer to the door, careful not to make too much noise. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. I saw nothing, only blackness. At first, I thought the light outside the apartment had gone out. Then I realized the peephole was covered. She was standing right in front of it, blocking my view on purpose. I backed away a little, but not far. My hand was still wrapped around the keys. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Sarah," I said, "why are you covering the peephole?" Silence. It was not normal silence. It felt heavy. It felt like the whole building had stopped breathing. Then Sarah spoke again, and this time her voice was low and full of rage. "Why are you trying to look at me?" I could not answer. "There is nothing wrong with me," she said. "I'm not like the others." I took a few shaky steps back from the door. On the other side, her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine." She kept saying it, over and over. The same two words again and again, barely loud enough for me to hear. I stood in the hallway, frozen, feeling all the blood drain from my face. She repeated it for minutes. Her voice cracked. Sometimes it sounded like she was crying. Sometimes it sounded like she was trying not to laugh. Then, without warning, she hit the door. Bang! I jumped back so hard I almost fell. Bang, she hit it again, harder this time. "Sarah," I shouted, but she did not answer. Bang, 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 the door shook in its frame. It was a strong door, solid and thick, but every hit made my stomach drop. I ran into the living room and grabbed one of the chairs, then another. I dragged them to the front door and shoved them under the handle and against the frame. I pulled a small table over next. Then a bookshelf. I moved anything I could while she screamed and slammed herself against the door. I was breathing too fast. My hands were numb. My whole body felt like it belonged to someone else. After a while, the banging stopped. For a moment, there was only silence again. Then I heard Sarah sobbing. The sound broke something inside me. Tears started running down my face. I hated myself for not opening the door. I hated her for asking me to. I hated the alert, the dust, the empty explanation, and the fact that just a few hours earlier, everything had been normal. "Sarah," I said through the door, my voice shaking, "please just tell me what's happening outside." Her crying quieted. Then she said, "Just go outside." That was all. A few seconds later, I heard her footsteps moving away down the hall. She was crying loudly again, and every step made me feel worse when I could not hear her anymore. I went back into the living room and sat on the only chair I had not pushed against the front door. For a long time, I stared at the curtains. The apartment felt smaller than before, like the walls had moved closer while I was not looking. I knew I had to look. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. My hand hovered near the fabric. I knew I was making it worse by waiting, but I could not stop myself. Finally, I pinched the edge of the curtain and pulled it back just a little. Nothing jumped at me. Nothing was pressed against the glass. I pulled the curtain open wider. At first, the street below looked normal. The buildings were there. The parked cars were there. The signs and shop windows and traffic lights were all the same. But something important was missing. People. I lived on the second floor of an apartment building that faced one of the busiest parts of town. Even on quiet days, there were always people outside. Cars passed. Groups walked to restaurants. Delivery drivers parked badly and blocked traffic. Music and voices drifted up from the street at almost every hour. It had always annoyed me. Now the street was silent. No cars moved. No one crossed the road. No one sat outside the coffee shop. No one stood near the bus stop. It was like the town had been emptied while I slept. Then I noticed the ground. The street was covered in a dark pink dust. It had collected along the sidewalks, in the gutters on parked cars, and in thin lines against shop doors. It looked almost soft from above, like strange powder or crushed flowers. For a second, my mind tried to explain it away. Maybe it was part of the festival. Maybe they had thrown colored powder into the air. Maybe it was confetti that had gotten wet and spread across the street. But those excuses disappeared when I saw a man step outside. He came out of a convenience store across the street. From where I stood, he looked like he was in his 40s. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone sneaking through a house at night and trying not to wake anyone. He took one step, then another, looking left and right. I was so desperate to talk to another person that I almost opened the window and shouted down to him. I wanted to ask what was happening. I wanted him to look up and tell me this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Before I could move, the sky darkened. Gray dust began falling again. It came down softly at first, drifting through the air in loose clouds. The man saw it and turned back toward the store. He rushed to the door and pulled on it. It did not open. Someone inside had locked it. I could see another man standing behind the glass, shaking his head. He was too scared to let him back in. The man outside started shouting. Even from my apartment, I could hear him. "Let me back in. It hasn't touched me yet. Look." He held up his arms as if proving he was still normal. Then he started hitting the door, just like Sarah had hit mine. But the dust was already falling on him. Small clumps landed on his hair, his shoulders, his arms, and his back. For a second, nothing happened. Then he screamed. I screamed too. His body went stiff, like every muscle had locked at once. He stood straight up in the street, his arms trembling at his sides. Then his skin began to move. At first, I thought it was crawling, like insects were under it. But then I realized it was being pulled. Something invisible seemed to be gripping his skin and dragging it backward. His arms tightened. The flesh stretched so much that I could see the shape of the bones underneath. His fingers jerked open, and the skin around them split. White bone pushed through like his skeleton was trying to crawl out of his body. He screamed and screamed, but he could not fall. His whole body stayed standing, trapped in place, while the dust worked on him. The skin on his arms pulled back farther, leaving wet red muscle and pieces of torn flesh. His fingers looked too long now, sharp and bare, with blood and strings of tissue hanging from them. He turned away from the convenience store, maybe to escape the horrified faces watching from inside, and for one terrible moment, he faced my building. That was when I saw his face. The dust had gathered on the top of his head, and the skin there was twisting backward. A thick bubble of flesh formed at the back of his skull, as if all the pulled skin and muscle were being wound together by some unseen hand. With every twist, his face stretched tighter. His eyes opened wider and wider until they looked like they might burst. He could not blink. He could only stare while his own body was changed in front of him. His nose split apart. The cartilage pushed forward in a pale shape that looked almost like a broken beak. His upper teeth tore through his lips. The corners of his mouth were pulled back into a huge, horrible grin that he had no control over. Then the twisting stopped. The fleshy mass at the back of his head loosened and slid down. It dropped from him in a wet lump and hit the street. For a few seconds, it moved on its own. It folded in on itself, dark pink and shiny, eating or melting into the pieces it had stolen. It broke apart quickly, shrinking like ice cream under hot sun, until there was almost nothing left. The man was still standing. What was left of him looked like a nightmare that had learned to breathe. His eyes were wide open, his grin stretched across his face, and his exposed fingers twitched at his sides. He looked at his own reflection in the windows around him and screamed with a voice that no longer sounded fully human. I stumbled back from the window and fell to the floor. I pressed my hands over my mouth, trying not to throw up. The image of him was burned into my mind. I tried not to think of Sarah, but I could not stop myself. Had that happened to her? Was she walking through the halls with her eyes forced open and her mouth pulled into that awful smile? Then I heard glass break. I already knew what had happened before I looked. The man from the street had smashed his way back into the convenience store. I should not have looked again, but I did. He was inside now. I could hear screams coming from the store, sharp and terrified. The people who had refused to let him in were trapped with him. He did not collapse from pain. He did not go into shock. He moved like the only things left inside him were agony and rage. One by one, he dragged people out of the store and into the street. They fought him. They begged. They grabbed door frames and shelves and each other. It did not matter. He pulled them into the open, and as soon as their bodies touched the outside air, the dust began to fall harder. The same thing happened to them. Their bodies stiffened, their skin pulled, their faces stretched. Their screams filled the empty street. I hid behind the living room door, wrapped my arms around my knees, and listened while strangers changed into things people would only talk about in ghost stories. When the screaming finally quieted, I forced myself to crawl back to the window and look through the curtain one more time. I needed to know if the dust cloud had moved away. The street below was full of those things. People who had been normal not long ago stood in the road with exposed bones, stretched faces, and unblinking eyes. But then, one by one, they started disappearing into nearby buildings. They moved quickly, almost excitedly, hunting for more people. Only one was still visible. It stood near the entrance to my apartment building. Then it looked up. Its eyes were impossible wide, wet and red, and they were fixed on me. A second later, it ran toward the doors below. The sound reached me soon after. Wet footsteps slapped against the floor somewhere inside the building. It sounded like shoes filled with blood. I backed away from the window and grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter. I held it in both hands, even though I knew it would not help much. Then I heard more footsteps. They were in the hallway. Doors shook. Fists pounded. Voices called out. Please open up. There's something out here. My children are in danger. You need to get your family out. Please, come outside. The words sounded human, but the voices did not. They came from broken mouths and stretched grins. They were not asking for help. They were using the words as bait. Some of my neighbors opened their doors. I heard the locks click. I heard confused voices. Then I heard screaming. People were dragged out into the hallway and down the stairs. Some fought. Some begged. Some called for help from neighbors they barely knew. But no one could save them. The creatures pulled them outside like they were taking part in some horrible parade. When nobody opened a door, the creatures started smashing into them. I heard bodies hitting wood again and again. I heard bones crack. I heard wet flesh slap against the doors. They did not care how badly they hurt themselves. They only wanted to get inside. I crept to my own front door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was full of them. And then Sarah stepped into view. At first, I almost did not recognize her. The shape of her body was still hers, but everything else was wrong. Her skin had been pulled back. Her eyes were fully exposed, wide and shining, unable to close. Her mouth was stretched into the same terrible grin as the others. She looked like pain had hollowed her out and left only madness behind. This time, she did not cover the peephole. She leaned close and stared directly into it. She knew I was looking. She did not speak. She did not beg. She just stood there, her raw eyes locked on mine through that tiny hole in the door. I do not know how long we stayed like that. My legs shook so badly I thought I would fall. I could not move. I could not breathe. Sarah knew I was inside. She knew the furniture was blocking the door. She knew it was only a matter of time. Every scream from outside felt like an execution. Every time they dragged another person into the open, the dust reacted like it was alive. It thickened above them, falling harder the moment someone untouched stepped outside. Then came the twisting, the pulling, the breaking, and finally, another monster joined the rest. Over the next few hours, the creatures seemed to change in another way. Their eyes were wide open, but they seemed to have trouble seeing. They turned their heads at every little sound. They rushed toward noises like bats hunting in the dark. A dropped object, a whisper, a sob from behind a door. Any small thing could bring them running. Sarah stayed outside my apartment for most of that time. I checked the peephole again and again, hoping she had gone away, but she was always there. Sometimes she stood still. Sometimes she placed her hands on the door. Sometimes her head tilted slightly, like she was listening to me breathe. Late at night, she and a few others seemed to get tired of waiting. They started hitting the door again. The first impact made the chairs jump. The second pushed the bookshelf back an inch. With every slam, the barricade moved a little more. I could hear their bodies breaking against the wood. Bones snapped, flesh tore. Something wet splashed across the other side of the door. But they did not stop. I knew the door would not hold forever. That is why I am writing this now. I do not know what is happening. I do not know what the dust is, where it came from, or why every post and video about it is being removed. I do not know why the warning only said to stay inside. I do not know if anyone outside this town even understands what is going on. This is my attempt to get the word out before it is too late. I am trapped in my apartment with a kitchen knife and a barricade that is already failing. I have never hurt anyone before, and even now, I do not want to. The things outside my door were people only a few hours ago. Sarah was my roommate. The man in the street was probably just trying to get home. My neighbors were only trying to survive. But they are not themselves anymore. I am writing this from inside my closet now. I moved here when the door finally started to crack. I am trying to stay quiet. I am trying not to breathe too loudly. I can hear them inside the apartment. They are in the living room. Something is dragging across the floor. Sarah is whispering again. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. If this message reaches anyone, please listen to me. Do not go outside. Do not open the door for anyone, no matter how much they beg. Do not look for your family in the street. Do not trust the voices in the hallway. Find a place to hide and stay there. Good luck. Story 5 It all began in the fall of 2025, when my sleep problems became so bad that I started to feel like the world around me was not real anymore. I had dealt with sleepless nights before, like most people do when life gets stressful. But this was different. This was not just lying awake for an hour or two and getting annoyed because I had work in the morning. This was night after night of staring at the ceiling until sunrise, feeling my body grow weaker while my mind stayed painfully awake. After a while, everything around me started to feel thin and fragile, like glass. Sounds were too sharp. Light hurt my eyes. People's voices seemed far away, even when they were standing right in front of me. Sometimes I would be walking through a grocery store or sitting at a red light, and for a few seconds I would forget where I was. My own hands looked strange to me. My apartment felt like a place I had only visited, not a place where I lived. I was tired in a way that sleep should have fixed, but sleep never came. By October, I was desperate. I had tried everything people tell you to try. Warm tea, cold showers, no phone before bed, white noise, dark rooms, sleeping pills, meditation videos. Even those breathing exercises where you count in your head until you feel ridiculous. Nothing worked. My body would lie still, heavy as stone, but my mind kept running. It felt like something inside my skull had forgotten how to shut off. That was when I booked an appointment with a neurologist in a quiet suburb of New Jersey. His name was Dr. Miller, and according to everything I found online, he was well known for treating serious sleep disorders. His reviews were almost too good. People said he had helped them when no one else could. They called him brilliant, careful, old-fashioned, and strange in a comforting way. One review said, "He sees what other doctors miss." At the time, that sounded promising. Now those words make my stomach turn. The clinic was in an old medical building at the end of a tree-lined street. It did not look like a clinic from the outside. It looked more like a small mansion someone had turned into offices. The brick walls were dark from age, and ivy crawled over one side like green veins. The windows were tall and narrow, with heavy curtains inside. A brass sign near the front steps had Dr. Miller's name on it, but the metal was dull, like it had not been polished in years. I remember sitting in my car for a minute before going in. It was late afternoon, but the sky had already turned gray, the kind of gray that makes the whole day feel like it is holding its breath. Dead leaves scraped across the parking lot. There were no other cars there, which I thought was strange, but not strange enough to stop me. I was too tired to care. When you have not slept properly in weeks, you stop questioning things that should worry you. Inside, the silence hit me first. It was not normal silence. It was too complete. Most clinics have small noises everywhere. A phone ringing somewhere, someone coughing, a printer humming, a receptionist tapping on a keyboard, a patient shifting in a chair. But this waiting room had nothing. No patients, no receptionist, no soft music playing from hidden speakers. Even the air felt still, as if nobody had breathed in that room for a long time. The waiting room was neat, but it looked untouched. The chairs were lined up perfectly against the wall. Old magazines sat in a small stack on the table, but not one of them was open or bent. There was a fake plant in the corner, with dust on its leaves. Behind the reception desk, the computer screen was black. The desk calendar still showed September, even though it was almost November. I almost called out, but then I saw a small handwritten note sitting on the front desk. "The doctor is in. Please enter directly." The letters were thin and shaky, written in black ink. Something about the note felt wrong, but at that point my head was pounding and my eyes burned so badly that all I wanted was help. I told myself some small clinic offices worked differently. Maybe the receptionist had stepped out. Maybe I was the last appointment of the day. Maybe I was just being paranoid because I had not slept. So I walked past the empty desk and down the short hallway. The exam room door was already open. Inside, an elderly man sat behind a wooden desk. He wore a clean white coat, buttoned all the way up, and his gray hair was neatly combed back. The room smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol and something older beneath it, something dry and sour. His head was bent over a notepad, and he was writing so quickly that the pen scratched against the paper like an insect trapped in a wall. He did not look up when I entered. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure what to do. Then he spoke. "What's keeping you from sleeping?" His voice was flat, not tired, not kind, not curious. Flat, it sounded like a recording being played from an old machine. There was no warmth in it, no normal rise or fall, just the words. I sat down in the single chair across from his desk. It was a narrow chair with a hard wooden back. The room was small, smaller than most exam rooms, and there was no second chair beside me. Only the desk, the chair, an examination table against the wall, a curtain hanging from a metal rail, and a tall cabinet with glass doors. I started telling him everything. I told him when the insomnia began. I told him how many hours I had slept that week, which was almost none. I told him about the strange feeling that the world was becoming unreal. I told him about forgetting small things, about the pressure behind my eyes, about waking up, even though I had never fallen asleep. He kept writing the whole time. At first, I thought he was taking notes, but as I talked, I leaned forward a little and looked at the page. He was not writing words. He was drawing circles, tiny circles, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They overlapped each other in tight patterns, one on top of another, until the page looked almost black. His hand moved fast, making the same shape again and again, circle after circle after circle. There was something awful about the way he did it. It did not look like a habit. It looked like a need. I stopped talking. His hand stopped too. For the first time, he lifted his head and looked at me. His eyes were dull and pale. They reminded me of polished glass or the eyes of an old doll. There was no light behind them. I felt a cold wave move through my body, starting at my chest and sliding down into my stomach. "Insomnia is not your problem," he whispered. I did not answer. "Your problem," he said, leaning forward slightly, "is that you are not noticing the person sitting right next to you." I froze. There was no one beside me. I knew there was no one beside me. The room was tiny. I was sitting on a single chair. There was no couch, no stool, no space for anyone to hide. Still, when he said it, I felt something close to my shoulder. Not a touch, exactly, but a presence. Like the air beside me had grown heavier. I turned my head quickly. "Nothing, Doc." Miller gave a dry, rattling laugh. It sounded like dead leaves being crushed in someone's hand. "Of course you don't see him," he said. "He's hiding in your blind spot." My mouth went dry. I wanted to get up and leave, but my body would not move. I was too tired, too confused, and too scared to make sense of what was happening. Dr. Miller opened a drawer on his desk and took out a small silver mirror. It was old, with scratches around the edges and a handle shaped like a thin bone. He held it up in front of me. "Look," he said, "and whatever you do, don't blink." I should have run then. I know that now. I should have knocked the mirror out of his hand and left that building without looking back. But fear has a strange way of making you obey. I stared into the mirror. At first, I only saw myself. I looked terrible. My face was pale. My eyes were red and sunken. My hair was messy. I looked like someone who had been sick for months. Behind me, the room seemed normal. The desk, the cabinet, the curtain, the empty wall. Then the image shifted. It was so slight that I almost missed it. Something moved behind my head, right where my skull met my neck. A thin shape slowly came into view, as if it had been folded into the darkness and was now unfolding itself. It was a hand, a pale, narrow hand. The fingers were too long, almost delicate, but wrong in their shape. The nails were blue at the tips, like the hand had been dead for a long time. It was gripping the back of my neck from a place I could not see. The fingers pressed into my skin with slow, careful pressure. For 1 second, I could not breathe. Then I screamed. I threw myself backward out of the chair so hard that it slammed against the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I barely felt it. I scrambled to my feet, clawing at the back of my neck. I could not feel the hand with my fingers, but in the mirror, I had seen it. I had seen it holding me. Dr. Miller did not react. He had already lowered the mirror and gone back to drawing circles. His pen scratched across the paper like nothing had happened, like I was not even in the room anymore. I ran down the hallway, past the empty waiting room, and out through the front door. The cold air outside hit my face, but I did not slow down. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away so fast that my tires screamed on the pavement. I do not remember most of the drive. I remember the highway lights stretching into long white lines. I remember gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I remember looking at the rearview mirror and then forcing myself not to look again. When I was far enough away, I pulled into a gas station parking lot and called the clinic's listed number. My fingers shook so badly I had to try twice. A woman answered. Her voice sounded normal, tired in the way nurses often sound near the end of a long day. I told her I had just seen Dr. Miller. I told her something was wrong at the clinic. I told her I needed to speak to someone in charge. The line went quiet. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, very softly, "Sir, what did you say his name was?" "Dr. Miller," I said, "the neurologist. I just had an appointment with him." She did not answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling. "Sir," she whispered, "Dr. Miller died in a car accident 2 weeks ago. The clinic has been chained shut since the funeral." I felt my whole body go cold. I looked up slowly and turned my eyes toward the rearview mirror. At first, I saw only the empty back seat. Then something pale rose behind the headrest. The blue-nailed hand was there, curling over the top of the seat. The fingers moved one by one, slowly tightening their grip, as if whatever owned that hand was pulling itself closer to me. I screamed again and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. The nurse's voice kept calling from the speaker, but I could not answer. I started the car and drove until the gas station disappeared behind me. I did not go home that night. I could not. Home felt too dark, too full of corners and mirrors. Instead, I found a cheap motel near the highway and asked for a room on the first floor. The man at the desk barely looked at me. I must have looked insane. My eyes were wide, my shirt was damp with sweat, and I kept glancing behind me. The room smelled like old carpet and cleaning spray. I turned on every light. The lamps, the bathroom light, the small light above the bed, even the television, which filled the room with bright moving colors. I told myself light would help. I told myself mirrors could lie when you were tired. I told myself that maybe I had fallen asleep in the doctor's office and dreamed everything. Then I went into the bathroom. The mirror above the sink showed me standing there with my hands shaking, and behind my neck the hand was still there. It gripped me from behind my own head, half hidden by the angle of the reflection. I spun around, but nothing was in the bathroom with me. I looked back at the mirror, and the fingers pressed tighter. I covered the mirror with a towel. Then I saw it again in the black window above the air conditioner. I closed the curtains. Then I saw it in the dark screen of my phone. I turned the phone face down. No matter where there was a reflection, even a weak one, the hand appeared. It did not move much. It only held on. But somehow that was worse. It felt patient. It felt like it had nowhere else to be. I did not sleep that night, of course. I sat on the bed under the bright motel lights, holding a plastic cup of water I never drank, waiting for morning. Sometimes I felt a soft pressure at the back of my neck. Sometimes I heard faint scratching near my ear, like nails moving against bone from the inside. By sunrise, I was not thinking clearly anymore. Terror and lack of sleep had twisted together inside my mind until they became one thing. But one thought stayed sharp. I had to go back. I had to know what had happened in that clinic. I had to find out who or what Dr. Miller had really been. I also had the silver mirror. I had taken it without realizing it, or maybe some part of me had grabbed it before I ran. It was in my jacket pocket, cold and heavy. The next morning, I drove back to the clinic. In daylight, the building looked worse. Older, abandoned, the front steps were covered in leaves. The windows were dark. And just like the nurse had said, the front doors were locked with heavy iron chains. A thick padlock hung through the links. There was no note on the desk this time. No sign of life inside. For a few minutes, I stood there, staring at the doors, trying to convince myself to leave. But then, I saw the narrow path along the side of the building. At the end of it was an emergency door. It was slightly open, not wide, just enough for a strip of darkness to show. I pushed it with my fingertips, and it creaked inward. The smell inside was terrible. Formaldehyde, old dust, wet wood, and something rotten underneath. The hallway was colder than outside. My footsteps sounded too loud. Every door I passed was shut. Some had nameplates. Some had been covered with brown paper from the inside. I reached Dr. Miller's office and stopped. It looked nothing like it had the day before. The desk was still there, but now it was covered with a white sheet. So was the exam table. Dust lay thick on the floor, except for the places where my own shoes disturbed it. The cabinets were empty. The calendar on the wall was years old. There was no old man in a white coat, no fresh paper, no circles covering the desk. For one brief, stupid second, I felt relief. Then I saw the notebook on the floor. It lay near the chair where I had sat. Its cover was black and cracked, and the pages inside were swollen as if they had gotten wet and dried again. I picked it up with both hands. It felt warm. I flipped through it. Every page was covered in circles. Some were drawn lightly. Others were pressed so hard into the paper that the pen had torn through. Page after page, the same shape repeated until my eyes hurt. I turned faster, trying to find something else, anything else. On the last page, there was a photograph clipped to the back. It was a photo of me, not an old photo, not something from social media. It showed me walking up the clinic steps the day before, wearing the same jacket I had on now. My head was lowered. My hand was reaching for the door. Under the photo, someone had written a date, 1998, my birth year. My legs almost gave out. A wet, heavy sound came from behind the examination curtain. Schlop, then again. Schlop. It sounded like someone walking across tile with raw, wet feet. I slowly turned toward the curtain. The bottom edge moved. Something behind it breathed with a thick, bubbling sound. I stepped back, clutching the notebook in one hand and the silver mirror in the other. The curtain pulled open. What stood there was not Dr. Miller. It wore his white coat. But the coat hung on it like a costume thrown over a broken frame. The thing underneath had no skin. Its body was made of exposed red muscle, dark veins, and pulsing nerves that twitched with every movement. Its face was worse. There were holes where eyes should have been, but something inside those holes glittered wetly. Its mouth opened too wide, and when it spoke, the voice came out full of static, like a radio stuck between stations. "I need your eyes," it hissed. "Mine are too old." A crushing pressure exploded behind my eye sockets. I screamed and fell against the desk. It felt like invisible fingers had pushed into my skull and were trying to pull my eyes out from the inside. The room blurred. Black spots crawled across my vision. The thing stepped closer, one wet foot after another. Schlop, schlop, I remembered the mirror. With shaking hands, I lifted it from my pocket and aimed it at the creature. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it saw itself. The thing froze. Its mouth opened, but no words came out at first. The muscles across its face tightened and tore. The empty holes where its eyes should have been seemed to widen. Then it made a sound I will never forget. It was not a scream, exactly. It was more like every scream it had ever stolen from anyone else being forced out at once. The mirror shook in my hand. The creature began to come apart. Its body cracked into flakes of black, oily dust. The white coat collapsed inward as if the shape inside had been burned away. The dust rose into the air, twisting like smoke, and for a second I thought I could see faces inside it. Old faces, young faces, mouths open, eyes missing. Then the dust scattered across the floor. The pressure behind my eyes vanished. I ran again. This time I did not look back. I did not stop to take the notebook. I did not close the emergency door. I ran through the hallway, out into the cold morning, and into my car. I drove for hours with the windows down, even though the air was freezing, because I could still smell that room on my clothes. I thought I had won. For the first time in weeks, I slept that night. I slept for 12 hours. When I woke up, I actually cried from relief. The pressure was gone. The noise in my head was gone. The world no longer felt like glass. I could breathe again. I could think again. I told myself the nightmare was over. I told myself whatever had followed me from that clinic had been destroyed. But it has been a week now, and something is very wrong. At first, it was small things. I forgot the password to my laptop, even though I had used it for years. I forgot the name of the street I grew up on. I forgot my mother's middle name. Then I forgot my mother's first name for almost 10 minutes. I stood in my kitchen with my phone in my hand trying to call her, and the contact name looked strange to me, like it belonged to someone else's life. My memories are not disappearing all at once. They are being taken carefully, piece by piece. The worst part is the photographs. Old pictures of me no longer feel like pictures of me. I look at childhood photos, birthday photos, school photos, and I know I am supposed to recognize the boy in them. But his face feels unfamiliar. His smile looks wrong. His eyes do not seem like mine. This morning I went into the bathroom to wash my face. I had been avoiding mirrors as much as I could, but I was tired of being afraid. I turned on the sink, splashed cold water over my skin, and forced myself to look up. My reflection stared back. I tried to smile. It did not move. The face in the mirror stayed frozen. Its eyes were cold and empty. Water dripped from my chin, but in the mirror the reflection's face was dry. I stepped closer, raising one hand. The reflection did not raise its hand. I touched the mirror. It was not glass. It felt like a thin, freezing membrane. Soft but firm, like skin stretched tight over ice. Behind that membrane, something moved. The bathroom behind my reflection faded away. In its place, I saw a dark room. The same exam room. The same chair. The same hanging curtain. And standing in the darkness was the real Dr. Miller, not the thing in his coat. The real man. He looked pale and tired, but alive in some horrible, trapped way. His eyes were full of warning. He lifted one trembling hand and pointed at my chest. I looked down. There was a thin surgical scar running down the center of my sternum. It had not been there yesterday. I touched it, and pain spread under my skin like cold fire. Then my phone rang. The sound made me jump so hard I almost fell. I looked at the screen. The caller ID showed my own number. For a long time, I just stared at it while the phone buzzed in my hand. Then, because some frightened part of me needed to know, I answered. For a few seconds, there was only breathing on the other end. Then I heard my own voice. It sounded happy, rested, full of life. Thanks for the body, it said. I could not speak. It's very comfortable, my voice continued. You can stay with Dr. Miller now. He likes the company. The call ended. The room around me began to change. The white bathroom walls stretched and darkened. The sink faded. The tile floor became old wood. The bright light above me flickered, then turned yellow and weak. The air filled with the smell of dust and formaldehyde. I looked down again. I was no longer standing. I was sitting in the single chair in Dr. Miller's exam room. The door was chained from the outside. Across from me, Dr. Miller stood beside the desk. His face was thin and sad. He held out the black notebook and a pen. I did not want to take them, but my hands moved on their own. He leaned close and whispered, "Start drawing the circles. It is the only way to keep from losing your mind." So now I draw, circle after circle after circle. I do not know how long I have been here. Time does not work right behind the glass. Sometimes I see people enter the clinic. Sometimes I see them through mirrors, windows, and phone screens. They look tired, desperate, ready to believe any doctor who promises to help them sleep. I want to warn them, but most of them cannot hear me. Maybe you can. If you are reading this, and you ever find a clinic that feels a little too quiet, do not go inside. If the waiting room is empty and there is a note telling you the doctor is in, leave. If a doctor will not look you in the eye, run. If he tells you that something is hiding in your blind spot, do not look in the mirror. And whatever you do, do not let them put you behind the glass.